Hello, everyone. I am Nikunj Bajaj, co founder and CEO at TrueFoundry. And today we have a very special guest, Liming, who is CTO at Nomad Health, joining us. Liming, it would be great if you can introduce yourself for our listeners.
Yes, thank you, Nikunj. My name is Liming Zhao, CTO at Nomad Health. We are a technology company in the healthcare staffing space. Essentially, there are doctors and nurses, these clinicians who are very willing to take on temporary assignments, travel around the country to go to different hospitals to help with patient care needs. And Nomad Health, among many other staffing agencies, are trying to ensure that there is a marketplace built such that these travelers can find most urgent and also attractive jobs to provide their services. As we all know, in healthcare, clinicians are at the shortage, particularly evidenced by the pandemic gone through. So Nomad Health took approach with a technology solution. Think about all the disruptions I've seen in the travel space. Today we don't go to a travel agency to book our trips, and we actually can do everything on our phone by our own decisions. We want to bring that efficiency, data transparency to this industry as well, using technology, marketplace recommendation, a lot of machine learning algorithm solutions to help the clinicians to basically, don't get bothered with all these process overhead. But whenever they are willing to provide services, they can be at the bedside serving their patients.
This is awesome. Thanks a lot, Liming, for the intro. Liming, I'm very curious. You all are solving this fantastic problem of making the healthcare workers more accessible, especially during travel times and stuff, right? Could you help us understand a bit more about how the marketplace functions? Like, how do you get the supply, the demand, and how does the overall workflow happen here?
Yes, as a marketplace, this is a typical two-sided marketplace. The supply side are the clinicians who actually, those who travel are typically not the ones that just got graduated and are trying to find an internship. Typically, they are the people who have gone through many years of training experience. Think about this: if you go to a different hospital with 1 week of training and orientation, you can jump in right there treating patients. So typically, we see these clinicians of multiple years of experiences, and therefore we have to build a platform to really encourage them to provide their history of work experiences, licenses, and certificates, and ensure that these things are up to date. On the demand side, which is the hospitals, we call them clients, there are two streams of ways to onboard these demand. Number one, in this industry, it's not new. It's been here for decades. There are actually leading players who are public traded companies. There is a concept called managed service provider. They're essentially the aggregator of many large hospital systems jobs onto their platform and distribute it to agencies like Nomad and many others, so that we can actually find different sources of clinicians and quickly send to these hospitals. On the other hand, there are direct clients. There are hospitals who are willing to work with agencies like Nomad and many others directly. So for Nomad, we have a sales team using our technology to onboard these clients and ingest their jobs. One of the key challenges in this industry from a technology perspective is that even though it's a heavily compliance industry like healthcare, right? Even though we don't touch patient data, but nevertheless, trying to be very accurate about what exact discipline is, what kind of requirements is needed, licensed certificates, be very precise of when you say how many years of experience is it the primary discipline or other things also counts. Nevertheless, this has historically been a human process. The recruiter in these traditional agencies are making those decisions to say, you might be qualified. Let me try to submit you first. And then towards the very end, they may be surprised. That's okay. They may be surprised the other way that, oh, I'm sorry, this job you're not qualified. But let me show you three other jobs. As you can tell, in a constrained marketplace where clinicians are actually of the shortage, this is not a great experience, right? It's a waste of their time and energy, and typically every such application requires filling certain forms and applications, multiple pages, a lot of time. Nomad, we approach this with a different understanding. That is, why don't we standardize these? Why don't we standardize these clinical jobs into requirements? Why don't we, other than the identity and profile of the clinicians, what we actually do is collecting their credentials. Why don't we standardize these credentials so that we collect once, and of course the credentials will expire and we have to renew. But otherwise, once you have that for this clinician, they can apply this to many jobs we see across different facilities on our marketplace. That is the power of technology, right? Human doesn't have to make those judgments once you do the upfront work of standardizing these data. Does that make
That's
sense? That's the marketplace dynamic.
It does. It does. Like completely makes sense. Thanks a lot, Liming, for describing that. Um, One other thing I think you started with during the introduction of Nomad, right? That you all end up using a lot of AI and ML in the to orchestrate the workflow here, right? Could you help me understand what are the areas where you end up using AI ML the most? Like what are the primary use cases of machine learning?
Absolutely. We have a data science team, and we've been trying a number of efforts and constantly trying new things. Currently, we found successful are the three primary areas. One, predictive modeling, which, given a case and at a upstream stages, try to predict outcome of the downstream stages. To the extreme, you can say, whenever we receive an application, can we say how likely this application will result into an offer? Or ideally offer accepted by the clinician. Bear in mind, again, clinicians are the scarce resource here. Ultimately, theoretically, if they want to work, there will always be a job for them. Therefore, trying to make sure that if we can predict the likelihood of these kind of ultimate best outcome for both sides, clinician and facilities, then we can prioritize work. So predictive modeling for prioritization. This help. We have been already investing a lot into this, and this is machine learning capability right now we have in our internal operations. Next is to look at the typical marketplace for recommendations. At the moment, we're exploring graph-based modeling for recommendation. We've seen some very encouraging results. So we've been building these things into our, ranking and outreach emails so that we are putting more attractive jobs in front of the clinicians, even though they may not have seen or had the time to explore all these exhaustive set of jobs. Finally, as the current trend, and nobody will turn their eyes away from the large language modeling. So, same with us. We've been playing with the GPT model. A perfect place to apply this is that the jobs came into Nomad in many different shapes and forms. Sometimes it's well structured. Regardless, many times there is a big blob of job descriptions written by the hiring manager at the facility side, and they may choose very degree of details and clarities, right? And we now have seen so many jobs going through our systems, and we eventually standardize them into requirements. This gives us a very rich data sets of examples, learning examples. So we've been applying these large language models to the job description and many other places in essentially the job area, such that we can better understand and extract and augment the job with a comprehensive set of requirements.
Interesting. The last one, as you can imagine, always raises more ears lately.
Mhm.
So here you mentioned that you're basically parsing the job description and augmenting the job description using the LLMs. So you're probably
Mhm.
fine tuning one of the GPT models and using that for your own data set.
Yes.
Understood. And you also talked about extracting meaningful information. So, like, are you actually trying to extract structured data out of these like blob of text that you get as a job description using one of these
Yes.
GPT models?
Yes.
Okay, understood. Very nice.
Originally, the extraction, before these more robust model came along, extractions are less robust, right? I mean, it's very simple, structured text extraction. We've tried it in very early on and didn't find much success. Later on, recently this whole field has dramatically shifted. So we give it another try, even when 2, I believe, came out, we were already starting to play with it, and we see some promising results. Now GPT-3 is much, that's the one we're using. It's much more robust now, and of course, new ones are coming along. We're always keeping our eyes on these new trends, but as you know, as a mature business, you have to manage the balance between 1% of accuracy versus 10 times the cost,
Totally.
right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I've been following the news around GPT-4 very closely, but have only gotten a chance to play around with the Instruct GPT and GPT-3 so far, not with GPT-4 yet.
Mhm.
One other thing here, like, so you are using the LLMs on the job description side. Any chance you have a similar use case on the resume side as well, Liming?
Resume is a very interesting topic. We actually look into this. I can only share that right now. We're definitely always trying it, but resume has a lot of varying degree of completeness because, after all, in healthcare clinical staffing, it's not like our like typical corporate jobs where it can be stay vague and eventually a lot of possibility can arise. Like essentially, if I don't know certain programming language, if I know a similar one, if I know Python, probably you're gonna take me for a backend job, assuming that I can actually learn whatever Golang on the fly at the organization. With a clinical staffing, this is unfortunately not the case. You either have the certificate or you don't, right?
Mm,
Sometimes you can obtain a license of different states. That's some flexibility we can afford. So in those cases, we must make sure that resume, not only in a way to describe all these qualifications are accurate, it's no longer just a professional resume. It actually has to go into all the details of your qualifications. Plus, we need evidences. You cannot just say, "Oh, I have a certificate for this." But what's the evidence, right? Either you have to upload the image of your certificate or give us the number. For example, as a nurse, you have a nurse license, and we have to check a authority database for this. So this all in all brings some complexity of just being confident to parse any resume uploaded to get those information. Nevertheless, I would say over time, I think this will become better and better. People are much more going to gear towards the standard way to describe their profession, work history, and providing all the necessary evidence. So I believe one day it will be the case, and that's actually a direction Nomad wants to hopefully lead. That eventually people will have a comprehensive digital resume credential set for themselves, ideally, using Nomad platform. Then it saves everyone's headache to parsing through arbitrary way of expressing the same thing.
awesome. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Liming, for describing that. Now let's start understanding a little bit more about how are you structuring the teams that are solving these machine learning problems, right? Like, do you have like a separate team that is building the model and from like the team that is deploying and maintaining it? I'm always interested in understanding the team structures, and it would be helpful
Absolutely.
if we can also talk about the team size, like how
Yes.
like yeah.
Yeah. Given where Nomad is, we have a still small-sized data science team comprised of 90 members, one manager, one data scientist, one data analyst, and one data engineer. The rest of the 5 members are all machine learning engineers, 2 of which are in the infrastructure side, so MLOps and setting up infrastructure, building all these foundations. The other 3 are machine learning engineers who are actually testing, building, and shipping models. To be very honest, in the current scope of problem we're facing, we don't necessarily have deep needs of coming up with our own models yet. It's more important to understand the problem, explore the I would argue like readily available solutions in other adjacent industries or reference problems, and see how we can adapt and utilize it. And hence, that's the success we found from the GPT adoption, graph-based recommendation, and these predictive models. So that's how we size our team and distributed the talent and skill sets across different areas.
I see. Okay, understood. So this is very interesting, Liming. Like this is, and to be honest, a bit counterintuitive to me. So I think the
Oh,
third
okay.
use case that you talked about, which is the generative AI use case, completely makes sense that you're able to leverage the external data sets or the external pre-built models, right? How does this work in the first or the second use case, where you are recommending candidates, or you're doing the predictive modeling, because I'm assuming that's very specific data that Nomad collects through the marketplace, right? So how are you able
Yes.
to utilize some of
Yes,
the
that's why we spend a lot of effort on the data itself, right? The data engineer, data analyst,
Hmm,
together with the infrastructure team, are ensuring that we're getting the data parsed, standardized, and acknowledge that we won't get it right in the first place, and iterate on that. Initially, we started with the Vertex AI infrastructure, and eventually moved into our own open source implemented feature store. That's an area we actually spend, like you said, this getting our proprietary data, the unique shape and set of data right, is actually the key, because otherwise looping through the known models and approaches to test different recommendations, to test different predictions, that's actually, I mean, it's still hard work, and you have to tune and validate, but there is a lot of reference points you can pull, and it's a matter of judgment and time to go through these things. So as you can see, the way we structure the team, a lot of investments are actually in ingesting, shaping, and making the extracting the features out of data reliably and very efficiently, and we can iterate that very quickly, so that the rest of the machine learning teams and data scientists can look into these and proceed with their own studies and researches.
interesting. I see. Got it. Okay. So there's a lot of effort that's getting invested on the data side, the feature engineering side of things. And I do
Yes.
have a follow-up question on the Vertex AI thing that you mentioned, but I do want to share another thought, which is
Hmm.
one thing I love about how you describe the team is how all these different pods of people are kind of working together, like the ML
Hmm.
engineers, the platform engineers, the data analysts, data scientists together. Because in my personal experience, like this type of team actually is able to move the fastest. Otherwise, there's like
Yes,
a lot of handoff that keeps happening from one team to the other, and like typically slows down the processes. So
absolutely.
very, very glad to hear that.
Yeah,
um
and then we didn't just build into this team size and structure on day one, right? We grow from a, one person, two people team, and eventually to this structure, and also, learned from our needs and bottlenecks, and scoped the roles and structure teams. So it's an evolution, which took almost a year to be at where we are now.
Very interesting, very interesting. Liming, there is one thing that I'm very curious to understand. So you mentioned that you all started building out the platform on Vertex AI, and then for the feature engineering specifically, you moved out of Vertex AI and built out something custom, right? Could you help us understand like what type of feature store solution, feature engineering solution that Vertex AI was offering, and then why did you have to move out to build something in house?
Yes, I think my team will get much more better details. I haven't been in the weeds deep enough to speak very
Hmm.
accurate about this, but based on our team meetings, watching the evolution is the following. Right? When the team was small, everyone is given the Vertex AI platform and trying to pull data from our data stores, raw data stores, and do the pivot, do they build their features, train their models independently. Right? Back then we have a few projects already. Each has a machine learning engineer, and we say, look, run fast, unblock yourself. Over time, then we realize that after all, we're trying to play with the same set. We want to understand, when did the clinician view the job, when did they apply, what was the outcome of the application, what are the set of credentials or preferences they set at the moment of engagement. Even though you want to predict different things, one want to predict whether the offer was there, the other one want to see, are there more jobs that they can be interested in, right? Then we realized that we cannot do this in a very separate fashion. We will contradict each other, and teams are starting to see how to reason and substructure these attributes more consistently become a challenge. That's where we not only say we need to do this together, but also we say let's actually identify individuals and formalize the ML infrastructure team to work with BI and to handle this, because also we have a BI organization who is actually looking at the data and in a much larger end-to-end spectrum. Right, it's not only just on the application side. We have to look into facility statistics and also revenue side of the stories. So that's the evolution to say, okay, we have to formalize the feature store. There has to be a team who is responsible to take the raw data, do a basic transformation to land those into business aligned way of interpreting entities, events, and dimensions. Then BI should be able to use this to quickly pivot to visualization using Looker. Data science team can quickly extract a subset of these features and call it feature store. And in this process, I believe the team identified the open source solution called Feast. That is the one that we're currently using to extract, store the feature for different models and feed that back into the modeling. And then in terms of modeling, we do still leverage Vertex AI. Deployment is a different pipeline. Maybe you want to talk about that later in a next topic.
For sure, yeah. Thanks a lot for clarifying that, Liming. So you're using Feast, the open source version of it, as your feature store, on top of which you're building something internally. And the other
Mhm.
interesting thing you mentioned is you're also enabling your BI team to be able to analyze these features and reports, basically.
I wouldn't say enabling the BI to analyzing these feature stores, but they do have a common upstream data store. That is the transformed data set. That's the part where BI and data science team has to work together and agree. In fact, our data engineer from the data science team is a main participant of building that table to transform all raw data. Basically, we want to say, look, as much as you have all the data from our own proprietary production database, segment tracking, even some third-party events about job views, we have to be clear, like, when did this clinician really first view this job? Which was the very first moment? Where was the platform? Which device? In which state, for example, logged in, logged out, or even during the login, how much of a credential did this person already presented themselves? Like,
Hmm.
you can see all different sources capture a piece of the story. They come in all together, and we're building a step before the feature store to say, let's aggregate and define what the entity should be.
I
From
see.
there, yeah, BI can go ahead and analyze however these dimensions are and chain subsequent events. And they may not apply like data science, like predictive analysis there, but aggregation, medium, average conversion rates, these are becoming straightforward, right? Whereas the data science team are going to take the same transform data claimed, aggregated from all sources, not worrying about there's another piece of information I have to join. It's all here, right? That's all the dimensions we have. Now start looking at, okay, how many features do I have to engineer such that I can have reliable signal that these things are strongly correlated to a application. These things are strongly correlated to rendering an offer from the facilities.
Very cool. Very cool. Um, And Liming, focusing on a couple of other parts that you brought up, which is around deployment and also model training, right? So you mentioned for training, you're continuing to use Vertex AI, but deployment is a separate pipeline. So first off, is it fair to understand, like fair to say that earlier, even your deployment was on Vertex AI, or deployment has, okay, it was, and then you moved out deployment out of Vertex AI?
Yeah, I can talk about our evolution of
Yeah,
of
would be
the.
great to learn that. Yeah.
So, as any most of the companies or even teams within large company, when we start, we want to be simple, right? So we invest heavily in Vertex AI. Also, largely due to that, majority of the technology infrastructure and Nomad Health is in GCP, so that's
Hmm.
a natural choice. And so we had everything in Vertex AI. Until we have more complicated business needs and deployment frequency, etc., we start to move because the rest of the engineering are actually deploying everything in Kubernetes clusters, like containers, and in GKE. So machine learning team look at the adjacent engineering team and say, look, can we do that? This is a lot more flexibility, right? We can control a lot of things on our own rather than adhering to the endpoint concept in Vertex AI. And after some easy exploration, we realized that this is entirely possible. So we basically moved the production service endpoint out of the Vertex AI. It has an endpoint concept to our own container and deploy to the GKE cluster. And in this case, we can scale and control and deploy entirely in our entire CI/CD pipeline that currently also is utilized by the rest of larger engineering organizations. So I think it stemmed from a just a realization of needs and practical complexity, and also fortunately having the engineering team having that knowledge and practices infrastructure in place, so the choice was pretty trivial, right? I think for other organizations who may or may not have that luxury, then they may consider other alternatives, maybe staying with, invest deeper in the existing platform, or build that capability over time.
I see. Okay, so like, you're saying that the rest of the software stack was already using GKE, and then the machine learning engineers also started to deploy the Docker containers directly on the same GKE clusters.
Yes, yes,
Understood. So that the Nomad team overall was already, like, fair to say that they were already, like, comfortable or even experts on managing Kubernetes in general,
yes,
like
yes.
working on. Okay,
We have multiple years of experience on this already.
nice, awesome. Okay, and for the training, you are continuing to use Vertex AI.
Yes.
And do people end up using like the notebook feature as well, or like what does it mean to train on Vertex AI? Like, like if you could help us understand that.
I again, this potentially we have to get into more details with my team because things has
Okay.
evolved
Yeah,
from the day where I actually were involved
makes
in
sense. Yeah, yeah.
setting the. But I believe our code are still just in Git. We checked and we deploy the code to Vertex.ai notebook, like synchronize it, and from there it can fetch the feature sets and actually utilize the models that Vertex.ai provided to train. The model we choose, we are very careful. We don't choose anything that may have a different flavor, whether you are calling it from Vertex.ai's library and supplies versus if we were to pull this from open source and essentially deploy ourselves. Once you make sure that's the case, then essentially you're just leveraging Vertex AI's entire infrastructure monitoring and quick, UI to visualize all these and manage all these processes.
Hmm.
I believe as things gets more even complex, right now the team are even orchestrating some of the flow workflows using I think I've heard about ML flow, something like that, to even
Okay.
bring that into more of our control. But in general, Vertex AI has a rich set of libraries and interfaces and tools for us to quickly try things, monitor its success, and understand are we getting some promising signals. And the code is the same, right? As we know, once we know that's the case, it is pretty easy to package that code into our own container and shipping production and service as a API endpoint.
Understood. Okay, and the team, you mentioned the team is also evaluating ML flow.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, any chance you all use Databricks as well?
No, Databricks is currently not in our stack, even though I've heard a lot of great things. So constantly evaluating, but as in my position as the CTO, I also have to be sure that we're not just attracted by shiny new things and
Yes.
cost consistency. The thing that actually one of the thing I always say is that your expertise, your knowledge, deep institutional knowledge around certain things is critical. Like if you find something that works, invest in it and make yourself the best expert in that.
That makes a ton of sense. Awesome. So, in this overall journey of starting with Vertex AI to where the platform has evolved today, roughly like how long is this journey, Liming? Like how long did it take to build out a platform on top of Vertex AI, and then moving critical parts like feature stores and deployment layer outside of it?
Yeah, I would argue that probably it's just about a year. Of course, we had
Wow.
the inception of the data science team more than a year ago, but it is in the recent year that we grow from a very small, 2 or 3 member team that is just trying everything they can and assuming Vertex AI, everything we basically say, like, look, we're not going to get out of sight what Vertex AI could provide us. We're not going to invent anything new. Let's just really grasp everything that Vertex AI can provide with us and try. To today, after a little bit more than a year, we have a 9 people team covering different fronts and taking on different responsibilities. Have a dedicated ML infrastructure team is trying to bring us data standardized, right? Bring us infrastructure and also formalize the deployment so that okay, once you deploy this, once you really find success with the model, moving this into production is a pretty straightforward process. And as long as your code stick to our standards using open source libraries, there should be no difference between what you test and what you deploy.
Lovely. This is
Of
incredible.
course, I've a caveat out like, of course, there are corner cases where this is doesn't apply. We're trying to fix this. This is largely speaking where we stand, and definitely the direction we're heading towards. And I'm not saying like Nomad is already 100% in this, everything ideal, shiny, smooth thing. It's a journey that we've gone through, and we're about to see its final state.
Very interesting, very interesting. So this is like, to be honest, like, I talk to a lot of machine learning leaders who are trying to build out platforms, and this I think would be like in the 95 plus percentile of, like, being able to iterate fast, because a lot of companies that we speak with typically take like the similar order of time frame, like 1 year, to probably just build out something internal on top of like a Vertex AI or a SageMaker. And then, like, the journey of evolution starts. But like, it seems like, my team is moving very fast. Great.
Thank you, thank you.
um,
I think number one, I have to say we have a great team. We have a great leader, Travis as the manager, and many other talented data scientists, engineer, and software engineer we hired who are come with experience and motivation to do things right. And also we benefit from starting from scratch. Right, there was a moment where we can actually say, look. We are about to start, and we've got people who have experience in this. Let's actually this time do the right thing. We all wanted to do we wanted in our past 10 years, and let's actually get it right.
Got it. Awesome. So, Liming, tell us about one innovation in the overall, like, the ML platform landscape that you all have built that, like, created like the maximum business impact. And here, I specifically want to, like, talk about something which is more of the platform or the infra side of thing, as opposed to the actual predictive power of the model itself, but the
Hmm.
operationalization of the model. Would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think my team will agree with me, and I definitely had multiple dedicated meeting around this is to actually formalize the future store implementation,
Hmm.
and we kind of touched on that yet already.
Okay.
As we all know, the problem we're facing at Nomad Health is not complexity of coming up with a very unique and complicated neural network to do whatever, right? The complexity is actually making sure the data we're looking at, the outcome of these data, are truly accurate and consistent. However, you are trying to
Hmm.
slice and dicing it. So, struggling from the previous approach of letting each model team just basically play with the data, transform, extract features on their own Vertex AI pipeline, and then eventually, checking the team on, oh, why I'm seeing this count here versus that amount of count there for the same event. We're saying let's actually consult this, and this is not only a effort and I would argue also innovation on the technology side, but also a major investment on the team structure side. Right, for that we actually built a sub team of ML ops team of two members invested in this, dedicated to this, as well as define the data engineering work and collaboration with BI and etc. Out of that, from a technology perspective, I think it's the implementation of a feature store using Feast and the whole pipeline work with DBT from the raw data store so that we can actually use DBT to transform the raw data to that those more normalized or standardized entities we talk about. We store this on BigQuery and for offline, and for online, more performance things, we actually use Redis. So in this case, we are truly putting forward a not only consistent but can serve different purposes and meeting performance needs. And this is I think, a very encouraging and impressive work by our data science team, particularly the ML ops team. As a result, we used to have to take, on the order of a month minimum, possibly two, to make a major update on feature and retrain and be confident about the model. Today, I think numbers are further improving, but I was told like it's a matter of days. We can actually refresh our model and be, if the signal exists, of course. If the signal exists, we can refresh the model and find that confidence in our signal in a matter of days.
Wow. That's like an order of magnitude improvement in terms of the time frame to, like, launch new models with new features and stuff.
Yes, yes. Now this starts from the data. Like you can iterate on your data, redefine and extract new features very quickly and go through a large data set, historical data set very efficiently. This is also when you train, and we have the consistency between the training code and feature used and the production code, feature store as well as deployment pipeline. Now it's like CI/CD. So everything has together to lead us to this current state of I'm happy about it, but I'm sure my team are still trying to make it faster and efficient. And this is the benefit of if you have motivated and talented software engineers. And maybe that's another part of innovation is we really embraced this entire um, team and problem solving with an engineering mindset, right? Essentially, we want to be good with our technology utilizations processes and encourage an engineer to set a bar of performance rather than only aiming at a business performance, saying, oh, are you able to predict something? But not only are you able to show a model, how fast, how accurate, like these technical metrics actually matters as the team plan their work.
Understood. Got it. Um, Liming, so we talked about this innovation with respect to feature store that you all have made. You also talked about some of the internal platforms that you built out. Tell us maybe about one design decision that you might have taken in this last 1 year that seemed very reasonable at that moment when you took the decision, but in retrospect seems like things could have been done differently. Basically, would love to hear things in retrospect about how some of these decisions are feeling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll still go back to the future store as a one example, right? I mean, I think at the early days that decision was right. I mean, given a small team, given that we don't know what might work, what type of even model may actually produce value to the business, there are many areas we look at. And also, by the way, as Nomad go through the pandemic, there are the needs of the business also shifts from time to time, right? Sometimes in the pandemic peak, I mean, we're literally facing the problem where there's so many applications coming at us, and we're not, our operations team are not equipped to handle all of them. We still need to have operators to look into something. We're not fully automated yet, but we're making dramatic progress towards that as our proprietary product technology are marching towards that. Okay, in this case, yes, then this predictive model of rendering offer is critical because if we were able to know among 10 things on your desk or queued in the task queue, which one is more likely to render an offer. Then we will work on those cases first, right? So, but now we are looking at the case where market has made some corrections. People are looking around more hesitant to just apply to any job because the bill rate from the hospitals due to the government funding are now ended. They are also more diligent now about the price they advertise because now everything comes out of their own pocket, right? So people are a little more hesitant to take an action. So in this case, recommendation model, right? You've seen this one. Why don't you take a look at the other three? You apply to this one. By the way, it takes no extra effort to apply to two more, right? If those are the cases being serviced, it will actually introduce a lot more opportunities for the clinicians and the facilities to transact. So as these things shift very quickly, so I think early on we made a decision to just focus on speed, focus on autonomy, focus on the uh, the 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 environment or the ability for each individual and small projects to move forward. Hence, we decided to say, okay, look, everyone look at this aggregated data store, and however you think makes sense to define certain entities, dimensions, and extract features and do it yourself. That has enabled us to quickly try a number of different things and actually stabilize our opinion and approaches to different types of business problem and what model might work for them. But once that's stabilized, we realized that this iteration and fork and any data inconsistency is starting to become a problem. And
Hmm.
then therefore we actually hired people, built team, and moved our entire feature extraction, storage, and servicing the models to a consolidated common ownership and new set of technology used. So I was still key on this journey as an example where I think we made a rational. the decision early on, but just the nature of the businesses and the reality of the team and the problem gets more mature, demanding much accurate data sets and faster iterations around the things we build, forces us to rethink the choice. And I think, fortunately, at this moment, I can say the evolution seems to be correct. We're definitely seeing not only accuracy improvements, but very importantly, efficiency. Right, the team are actually able to test and deploy and iterate this entire process much faster.
Got it. I see. I see. Okay, understood. Um, all right. This is great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Liming. There are a couple of other things that I wanted to there's this one fun question that I always like to ask machine learning leaders is especially people who have explored a bunch of tools in the open ecosystem and in the cloud providers as well, right? If you had to pick up let's say two or three tools that you think solves most of the problems in the MLOps stack, right? uh, what would those be like? And I can give an example. Like for example, what you mentioned is a feast for feature store, and let's say an ML flow for some orchestration or experiment tracking, right? Or a cube flow for the entire pipeline management, or a Vertex AI for the end-to-end thing, right? So like some combination of two or three tools, or even one tool that you think is a fair, like basically will get you to a fairly good MLOps stack.
I see. Um, I don't think I'm the best person to give that recommendation. My team probably can provide
Sure.
a much more, detailed and more relevant answer. I can actually jump back on to say early on, if you don't know what you need to choose, right? I think even though I already shared a story about us zigzagging a detour, I
Yeah.
would say that is still the right path. Early on, if you have not made all these choices, and be very clear, unless you have a expert who knows exactly down the road what 2 years down the road you might need, and you potentially could start implementing this if you have a extremely high confidence. Otherwise, would say pick an environment such as Vertex AI, and if you are in AWS ecosystem SageMaker, like really invest in a tool or platform that actually provides most of what you need, and start getting the data right, starting getting your model and business outcome right. And all of those platforms typically comes with a lot of ready to use off of shelf toolings, monitoring everything, so you can really focus on getting your business value realized first. Once that's the case, a lot of things can come, and you can move the entirety of that out of the platform because you have built a very robust, engineering team or data science team around this, or piecemeal wise. That's how Nomad has taken, right? We've taken the feature store out because that's the hardware. We just don't find a very efficient solution natively in Vertex AI. And then we start to take the production deployment out, still leaving the entire training stuff in, because that's the place where we can afford, the kind of latency and the tooling and adjacent services from this platform actually is of high value to us. So I, I'm sorry I cannot recommend a full set of tools to start with, but I think the journey we have gone through is something one can look back and say, and there's a lot of learnings from this, and I think we've gone through a journey that I think is right in most
Hmm.
cases as people explore and try to understand what they're trying to build. And maybe for different companies, you just have to go through this journey at different paces. Some may take longer, some may accelerate even in after 6 months. You already know what you want. Go ahead.
Makes sense. Makes sense. It's always a journey. Pick something that works reasonably well for now, and then iterate from there, basically.
Yes, I mean, think about it. If you only have two people starting with your data science team, and the first thing you do is to set up all your proprietary infrastructure, for what, right?
Yeah.
What have you proven this fancy, engine and
Makes
super
sense. Yeah.
powerful infrastructure could actually yield?
No, that makes a ton of sense. Liming, I'm gonna ask you one last question for this session today, which is around the entire cloud cost optimization, right? And also especially that you have experienced both, like using a managed platform and then trying to build out something, some building out and maintaining something, like outside of that platform. I would love to understand how have you been thinking about the cloud cost across this transition, and what are the things that the team is doing to, I guess, think about the overall cost. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I think this area, my team and I would admit, this is actually a weaker spot of Nomad Health. Fortunately, our footprint is well controlled and small, so we may not be at the best of monitoring cost and react immediately. But because the base size is small enough, so the small fluctuation we see are acceptable, and
Hmm.
therefore, I think solutions from TrueFoundry is actually very valid once the team actually gets that base number larger than a certain threshold. Then real-time monitoring, alerting to actually look at your infrastructure, how many models are running, how long does it converge, etc. It's going to be helpful. From our side, what do we do? Well, we try our best human practices. We actually have monitoring piped into our collab notebook and send these logs and signals to Looker. We look at this, and on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, if things surges, we investigate into what's going on, what are the instances that's causing this, and potentially restart or terminate certain training models. It is manual, to be very honest, but given the number of complexity we're facing practically right now, and the reactive approach works so far okay. And the team, set a budget, and of course from the GCP side, you get that report pretty real time. And so far, they have not, surprisingly exceeding those budget. And there's fluctuations around this, but we look at this on a bi-weekly basis, and it was fine. So an area, a can we have kicked it down the road for a while, but over time, I believe we have to pick that up.
Understood. And Liming, like between the two setups, right? Like using something completely managed versus building out something in house, right? There is obviously, like the cloud and the infra cost that we're talking about, and then there is the maintenance aspect as well. So as a CTO, if you had to evaluate the cost or the resourcing angle towards it, like I don't know if you've done any analysis or any thought experiments towards that. Like, would love to hear your insights on that as well.
Mhm. Yes. So I think for the early stages, I would encourage our teams to use managed services because then the developer cost is another cost, right? Not only infrastructure cost. If you have to hire one more person to implement things that you would otherwise purchase for, that's a math that you have to in your head as well.
Hmm.
Then getting to a more mature stages where you have a hybrid, where you have managed services, you have owned infrastructures. I think it's just a discipline the team needs to go through, and we do that. Every environment we secure has tags, and therefore we can actually attribute the cost for different teams, different purposes, relatively accurately. Another thing is that now with this large language model, you're paying. They're getting unknowingly, like the price can change very very quickly over time, and there,
Yes.
so we also monitor those things as well. I guess rule of thumb, depending on your stage, like in the early days, I think here we have a little bit more uh, tolerance about variations, but rather, you know, over a span of 6 months or 1 year, um, what do we think we are going to spend, and what kind of outcome can we get out of the machine learning power, like business outcomes we get. And then once that project is relatively stabilized, and then we start to make sure that we be careful and monitoring cost and pay some engineering effort and therefore cost to move certain high performance things out of high cost managed services to our proprietary owned. There is a little bit of math behind it, but should be pretty straightforward and simple, right? Essentially, you're trading X amount of development cost plus Y amount of managed cost, sorry, self serviced cost versus X plus Y time of full managed cost is the trade-off making sense? If that's the case, for like I said, relatively stabilized products, that's a consideration we will discuss and approve and proceed. Whereas for not very reliable models, unless the infrastructure is there and you use it, so fine. But otherwise, we tolerate a little bit more fluctuation on the cost side.
Understood. Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Liming, for sharing your deep insights about the evolution of the ML platform within Nomad, and how your team has navigated really fast in building out something that works very well for your team. I think our listeners would learn a lot from this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And like I said, I'm sure lots of toolings and product that TrueFoundry is building is going to be super helpful as companies scale and getting that real time data insights from their model convergence cost, and also manage this entire infrastructure much more effectively.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Liming, for mentioning that. All right. Take care. I'm gonna